a great way for them to be able to continue to learn and earn at the same time. One of the other real benefits of apprenticeship that we see, I do some work with the oil and gas industry, is we have a lot of folks who have been in our industries for a long time. They're getting ready to retire and transition out. An apprenticeship can actually take advantage of what they have up here that isn't necessarily written down anywhere to train that next generation of workers. So it can be a great way for those industries who have legacy knowledge within their workforce that they maybe haven't captured to utilize some of those veteran workers as mentors to that next generation of workforce. Another great point about apprenticeships is that our younger workers are looking for mentoring these days. They're looking for that mentoring. They're looking for that connection on the job. So registered apprenticeship actually offers that mentoring. And we at the Hub have actually done, you may want to go to our website and check it out, a whole series around mentorship because it's something that was really important to our sponsors. Things like, what does it take to be a good mentor? What should you be looking for? How do you evaluate how that relationship is going? What questions should you be asking? But again, the apprenticeship is really offering that paid job. It's offering classroom training plus training on the job through the mentor and credentials. And those credentials are portable. And I certainly know that Grit does a lot of great work with those credentials. So again, apprenticeships can be another great way for our workforce to earn those credentials. So industry driven is the other thing. One of the things that a lot of the employers that we work with on these projects, I just talked to Detroit Diesel and Cambridge this past week about their program. One of the things that they like is they get to train the workers their way. So they are able to train that worker from day one in the way that they would like things to be done. So they're not breaking bad habits, if you will. Also, they really like it because it's a way for them to give a career path and a career ladder to their workers. Because with apprenticeship, we have those built-in steps. So I achieve step one as the worker. I know exactly what my next step is. And I also know what pay increase goes along with that. And again, if you've done very much research on Gen Z, that is certainly something they're looking for. What does that career progression look like? And what is in it for me, essentially, from where I start to where can I go with this company? So registered apprenticeship dovetails nicely with some things that employers are looking for and also our workforce. And again, many of our workforce is looking for another opportunity. They want an opportunity where they are not going to have debt. And so the apprenticeship also meets that need because, again, learning while earning. Some of the challenges that our employers are facing that we hear about every day when we're out there working with them, the high turnover. I mentioned earlier the retiring employees and that lack of a talent pipeline and insufficient succession planning. And then those shortages of skilled workers, especially in technical areas. A number of the employers that we've worked with throughout Ohio have been, for example, manufacturing or construction companies where they've got some really technical needs for those workers and they need a great way to get them trained because they haven't been able to successfully hire them on the street. What are the benefits for employers? We're going to touch on this a little more later, but turnover. Turnover is greatly reduced with an apprenticeship. And also, again, we build that talent pipeline and it's very customized to what the employer's needs are. Some different types of registered apprenticeship. Probably still the most common one that we see is that time-based, where we are doing the 2,000 hours of on-the-job training per year with 144 hours of classroom training corresponding to that. That's probably still the most common one. We are seeing more companies interested in that last category, which would be the hybrid apprenticeship, where we kind of have minimum on-the-job training and then ways for those apprentices to demonstrate their competencies. So they're actually able to, in some cases, reduce the amount of time that an apprenticeship and those steps can take. But there are those three different ways you can do an apprenticeship. We do occasionally have a company that wants a competency-based apprenticeship. We are seeing some more interest in that, but we haven't done as much work in that space as we have with a time-based or with a hybrid apprenticeship. Some components of apprenticeship. It's got to be the paid job with the competitive wages. We want that structured on the job training. And again, that's where that mentor comes in and is very important. So if you're working with companies on apprenticeship, there may be a need to really help them build the capacity of some of those mentors. What we've seen occasionally is a company will have someone who's very technically skilled. You know, someone is a great, let's say, electrician, but what they're not so great at is the people side of things. And so they put them into a mentor role and then it doesn't always work out so so well. So I just encourage you, if you are working with companies, really think through that mentor role and helping build some capacity through some training of those mentors, because it can definitely make the apprenticeship a much better experience for the apprentice. And it also makes the mentor feel much more prepared to appropriately help that apprentice. Job-related classroom training. So that's where some of our educational partners come in. Here in Ohio, we have done quite a bit of work, for example, with Sinclair Community College. They are also a group sponsor for apprentices. For example, at Detroit Diesel, they do some work with Zane State College. So there is an opportunity for a number of colleges and career centers to get involved with that classroom training. Also, I mentioned the mentoring and then the industry recognized credential. We're getting those credentials as part of an apprenticeship, which obviously fits with some of the different funding streams that are out there. Plus, again, it actually helps our apprentices to be able to have that portable credential, because now they've suddenly got something that they can take to any job anywhere in the country. Some myths about apprenticeship. I just think this is interesting. As we're thinking about apprenticeships, we have myths on both sides of the equation, right? We have myths on the employer side. We have myths on the potential apprentice side. When we're looking at young adults, these were some of the most common myths that were found by Young Invisibles when they did a study back in 2015. And we still run into these, unpaid. So some youth that we might be working with, and some adults as well, may think that apprenticeships are unpaid. So that can be a barrier to us in getting them interested in recruiting for apprenticeship programs. Believe that apprenticeships don't exist in their communities. So they might think that those are somewhere else, but not necessarily here in our area in Appalachian, Ohio. Or they believe that it may prevent them from going to college. So these are some of the myths that we're overcoming about registered apprenticeships. And we'll talk about ones that employers have a little later, but we need to keep these in the back of our mind when we're thinking about that recruiting process. We have to figure out, how are we going to overcome these apprenticeship myths, and not just among our potential apprentices and employers, but also among what I call those influencers out there. I think often we're very focused on those target populations we're serving, like an employer or like our potential apprentice, but we're not thinking about those influencers like the teachers or the guidance counselors or the parents or the grandparents who may be able to influence our potential apprentice to decide to go that route or not go that route. So we need to have a comprehensive strategy to address those myths, and it needs to include our influencers too, not just our potential apprentices. A diverse range of industries. One of the things you'll see when we get into a little bit later here, some of our conversation about our intermediary role at the Supply Chain Automation Workforce Hub is apprenticeships are now in a really wide range of industries. So we have seen them in things like healthcare. We have seen them in things like biotech. Ohio even has now a teacher apprenticeship program. So many more industries are actually getting into apprenticeship than they had used to be. There's also a big push right now within childcare. So childcare apprenticeships as a means to try to help with that childcare workforce shortage. So you might be thinking, well, apprenticeship is just traditionally a union thing, or it's traditionally a construction thing. The reality is there's now a wide variety of industries who are participating in apprenticeship. So some of the benefits, we touched on these, but that career advancement, I think, again, today's workforce is really looking at that. They're also looking at that education without debt. And from our employer side, they're really looking for those highly skilled employees and building that talent pipeline, especially if they have an aging workforce, which many businesses in our Appalachian, Ohio region certainly have that aging workforce. Some benefits. These are great conversation pieces when you are talking to employers or potential apprentices. So especially for those employers, the Department of Labor just completed a recent study about the ROI. And so that $1.47 return on every dollar spent by apprenticeship really catches the attention of an employer, because they're all about ROI, right? We think about those apprentices, some of the wages that they can earn, and also some of the lifetime earning advantages, and then the return on investment for the government. So about $28 back for every dollar that the government actually invests in apprenticeship, and then 92% of our registered apprenticeships are actually employed upon completion of apprenticeship. There was also another recent study out, and I think you all would find this very interesting as well, particularly on how apprenticeship can move the needle for some of our underserved populations. When we think about women in particular, for example, that study really showed that more wage gains are actually realized by women and some of our underserved populations from apprenticeship than many other training investments. So some other benefits of apprenticeship, I think that structured OJT with those mentors is really awesome for people. And it's certainly something that when we've talked to apprentices and done those success stories here with the Supply Chain Workforce Hub, it's certainly something that our apprentices talk a lot about. One of the other things that a group of our apprentices recently talked about that I talked with from down in the Cincinnati area who were participating in a machining program, they really talked about how they were going to be able to go on to college at Cincinnati State because that pathway had been created from their high school over to Cincinnati State. So the pathway was already built. So it's kind of back to that program progression down there at the bottom. We can actually have, in many cases, a pathway built to a college degree. I spoke recently with Cleveland Cliffs in Zanesville, and they also have an apprenticeship program. And one of the things they talked about was how their apprentices will actually end up with a college degree from Zane State at the completion of the program. So we can actually structure those programs to include college credit as well, and again, avoid that student debt. So communicating apprenticeship value, these are some of the common questions that we get from both employers and apprentices when we're thinking about apprenticeship value and how we're going to communicate that. They want to know, what's the length of the program? What will they learn? Who will mentor the apprentices, and how will we evaluate the apprentices' progress? So when we think about some of those answers, we want to have those ready for our program because it's going to make it that much simpler for us to be able to market and promote our program if we have that information ready, and also communicate that value proposition to potential partners that we might be working with on helping us recruit. So we really want to be thinking about what's the value of that apprenticeship and what does that apprenticeship look like, and communicating that clearly both to an employer and to an apprentice. A couple of statistics I wanted to throw in here regarding industrial careers, because I know that's something that we work a lot with in our region, and it does impact our ability to recruit for things like apprenticeships or manufacturing openings. This was a recent study done by the Soder Group, and when we think about this, Gen Z in particular, and that's some of our young adults, right, don't think that industrial work maybe is something they want to consider. They think the work conditions are unsafe, pay is low, and the benefits might not be good. So again, that's where, back to the myths we talked about a little earlier, we're going to have to work with our employer partners, and we're going to have to get them involved, hopefully helping to show their environments to help get people thinking more about apprenticeship and to overcome some of these negative perceptions that our young adults might have about apprenticeships and about industrial careers specifically. Also, when we think about younger workers, they are looking for those flexible hours and flexible work days. So one of the things we spend a lot of time on at the Hub is really trying to educate employers also on how to work well with younger generations of workers, really with all generations, but in particular with those young adults, because they're really trying to figure out how to move the needle with them. So again, as we think about these statistics, some say they might consider an industrial career if they knew somebody working in there. A lot of this also applies to apprenticeship. They might be more likely to consider an apprenticeship if they knew someone who was working an apprenticeship. But when we think about those flexible hours in particular, how do we educate our employers to help them understand what this workforce is now looking for? Because it has changed and evolved. Some apprenticeship sponsor types. So many of you are probably familiar with that motto I mentioned earlier with the union sponsoring apprenticeships, and that still does happen quite frequently. We work a lot, for example, with IBEW all over the country with them sponsoring apprenticeships. Most recently, we started up one in Tampa, Florida. Some employers also have their own apprenticeship. I've mentioned a couple here on the line today, Detroit Diesel and Cleveland Cliffs, for example. So those employers actually run their own programs. And then down at Sinclair, when I mentioned them, they are actually one of those intermediary third-party sponsors. So we're seeing more community-based organizations like chambers, workforce boards, or educational institutions like Sinclair actually sponsoring those apprenticeships and kind of doing that as a group sponsor model. That can work well in rural areas like ours, where one company simply may not have enough people to do an apprenticeship on their own. That's where that intermediary group sponsor model can be really helpful, because then we can bring together different companies with one sponsor to try to help train multiple apprentices. Some things to keep in mind as you want to think about sponsoring an apprenticeship program. There is going to be some documentation required. So you're going to need to maintain a file on each apprentice. It's going to need to include the completion of that related technical instruction, how they're progressing through the work process, their signed apprenticeship agreement, the proof of wage increases, EEOC policy, and then hiring procedures and HR records. So it's very important to understand what you're going to need to do. That's one of the things we do at the Hub is we actually help employers at no cost or other sponsors like Sinclair to establish apprenticeships and make sure that they are checking the right boxes and following the right steps. You're also going to need to make sure that you get the data entered into RAPIDS, which is the Department of Labor's tracking system for apprenticeships, and then finally be prepared for audits because apprenticeship programs do get audited. So building an RA program, I really like this slide because it kind of takes you through step by step. What are some of the different pieces involved if you want to establish an apprenticeship program? And it kind of just, again, takes you through. So first, we're going to start looking at identifying those partners. Then we're going to look at building that apprenticeship. We're going to look at getting that program registered. And then we're going to look at launching the program. Here at the Hub, we actually help employers or sponsors such as educational institutions at every single phase here. And we'll talk a little more about that, but doing things like building standards. We're working with a company right now in New Mexico to establish the first ever registered apprenticeship in New Mexico. And we're actually helping them with those standards. So we're kind of over to phase 3 with them. We've gotten them through 1 and 2. We're now over to phase 3. But then we've got others that are kind of a couple companies here in Ohio back at phase 1, where they're just starting to identify some partners. Then we have others who are kind of now in that program where they have launched. And as I mentioned earlier, they want help with things like, how do I make sure that I'm effectively mentoring my apprentices? So there is help out there. And again, the services we offer at the Hub are available at no cost. Some key insights. I mentioned earlier some of our myths about apprenticeships. Employers also need to be educated about apprenticeships. There are a lot of myths out there. So does the general public. Industry outreach obviously is going to be really crucial to any apprenticeship, especially if you're doing that group sponsor model, because you're going to need to get multiple companies involved and interested in working together. We want to be, and Grit does this very well, collaborating with those other associations out there like OMA or Best Ohio or AOMC. Developing flexible programs that meet the employer's workforce needs. One of the interesting pieces about the Hub is we have apprenticeships that are as short as 1 year all the way up to 5 years. So again, they can be varied to meet the employer's needs. So I think a lot of employers think they're one size fits all. It's that typical 4-year process. The reality is there's a lot of flexibility with an apprenticeship, and we can do something to meet employers' needs. We may have to offer incentives to bring employers to the table. We'll talk about that. We at the Hub actually have an incentive fund. Some innovative strategies to reach potential participants. One of the most common challenges that some of our sponsors face is actually getting participants into their registered apprenticeship programs. So we talk a lot about good recruitment strategies and how we get potential apprentices interested in the program. And then we did touch on that group sponsorship model. So about the Hub. We are a Department of Labor intermediary, and these are some of our sister intermediaries all around the country. So I mentioned earlier how apprenticeships are available in multiple sectors. So if you are working with an employer who's not in supply chain, our focus is supply chain automation. So we do a lot of work with advanced manufacturing companies, a lot of work with companies who are in that distribution and kind of logistics type of area. However, as you can see here, there are intermediaries for many other sectors. So for example, the National Restaurant Association, you see the Wireless Infrastructure Association. So these are intermediaries just like us who can offer no-cost services if you have a company who's interested in a different sector perhaps than what we serve, and we can get you over and get you connected to them. What is the role of an intermediary like the Supply Chain Automation Workforce Hub? Well, we're contracted by the Department of Labor to actually help scale up apprenticeship programs all over the country. So how do we do that? We're doing some connecting of partners. Probably the biggest one that we're doing is that number 2 item, which is offering expertise to build programs. And then number 3, doing things like today to really help people understand a little more about apprenticeship and some of the benefits and what a good apprenticeship program could look like. Some core functions that we do as an intermediary at the Supply Chain Hub. You remember earlier we had the little timeline with the phases of what it takes to build an apprenticeship program. These are some of the examples of work that we have done in those various phases to help companies or help sponsors get an apprenticeship started. So you see here things like recruitment, helping to register programs, helping to actually make sure that a company is set up or a sponsor appropriately for reporting. So we help at all phases of that apprenticeship development and launch. So what are we? Well, we are a one-stop solution for helping with supply chain automation specialists. Like I said, we're doing education and outreach about the benefits of registered apprenticeships. We just did a program back in November in Indiana. We had about 95 people attend, and we did a program to really talk about what is apprenticeship, what's available to you, and we have some best practices there from some employers who we've actually worked with in launching apprenticeships. We offer financial incentives. We'll talk about that. We do have an incentive fund. And then that technical assistance, that's huge for a number of our companies or sponsors because they feel like apprenticeship is such a maze and there's so much red tape. They need help getting through that. And we do a lot of that with registration. We also offer the training and the mentoring that I talked about. And then we help look for additional funding opportunities. Some other things that we do, we're really helping those employers customize their registered apprenticeship program. And then I mentioned earlier, working with places like Sinclair or Georgia Piedmont Technical College who have launched apprenticeships. We actually help them in some cases with their curriculum development. And we help them put together apprenticeship type curriculum and also with recruiting. Our incentive fund, we do have an incentive fund. So this incentive fund can actually be used to offset the costs of training apprentices. As you see here, new sponsors or employers can get up to $1,000 per apprentice, $30,000 max per year. And these funds can actually be used to help with training of apprentices. They can be used for things like equipment, curriculum development, tools. So this can be a great way to help a company get an apprenticeship launch because cost is often a challenge at the beginning when you're looking at an apprenticeship because there are some upfront costs. That's where our incentive fund can come in and be a potential help to you or your sponsors if you are launching an apprenticeship. So just an example of a technical assistance plan where we actually help someone with some specific things about apprenticeship. Outreach, marketing, and recruitment. We actually helped revise some marketing materials, help them organize some events. We did a plan for their affirmative action. That's something that's required for an apprenticeship. We actually helped. And then we also helped them to develop their new low voltage electrician occupation that they were doing and get that registered as an apprenticeship program. So that's just one example of when we're working with someone, this is an example of the kind of plan that we put together and the kind of assistance that we can provide all at no cost. Some other resources for apprenticeship. This is an example of the Universal Outreach Tool. This is available at no cost through the Department of Labor, and it can actually help take a look at some recruitment sources throughout various regions and places and identify those contacts. And then you can get out to those sources information on your apprenticeship opening. So this is a great tool for sponsors who might be looking to recruit because it helps them kind of reach more partners more quickly. And that's all available at no cost. Some examples of how we have worked again with employers on incentives and some other funding that we'll talk about in a minute that's available. These are some example costs and some examples of how partners can work on apprenticeship. So we're often, for example, working with workforce development boards, people like Crystal, to help recruit those employers and sponsors and provide those supportive services. And then I mentioned earlier, we work, for example, with the educational institutions on that related technical instruction. A couple of examples of some dollars that are out there. We've seen a lot of braiding of funding of WIOA dollars specifically to support those apprenticeship programs. So it's a great opportunity to talk to your local workforce board about whether there might be some funding available to help with apprenticeship. There's the work opportunity tax credit that's available that can be offered to employers who are hiring that may have significant barriers to employers. And then you see down there at the bottom, there's also some open funding opportunities available to expand apprenticeship. And you can also look for those who may have been awarded those funds to see if there might be an opportunity for you to partner with them. Some other apprenticeship resources. Ohio does a really good job because we're what's called a state apprenticeship office. So we run our own office and register our own programs through Apprentice Ohio. So you see here some different resources. A couple I want to draw your attention to that are available at no cost is number one, that partner finder. Number two, that standards builder. So the standards builder is a great tool because it's available at no cost to you. And if you are looking to launch an apprenticeship, you can actually start plugging some information in and it will start helping you to generate standards. And then finally, the occupation finder, another great tool that's available at no cost. You can actually take a look at that and see, hey, I'm interested in an electrician apprenticeship program. Has someone somewhere already registered one? The occupation finder will actually help you look for that. It also will give you a list of all different occupations that have ever been approved for registered apprenticeship. And then on a regular basis, they'll pop up their new apprenticeship programs that they have recently registered. So again, a really great resource to take a look at other programs that might already exist. You can call them for information or best practices, and also see what their program looks like through that occupations finder. And with that, I will stop. Does anybody have any questions? And I haven't had a chance to check out the chat, so I'm going to have to do that to check out the different candies that everyone has. Does anybody have any questions?
Well, Dorinda, you are always a wealth of information. And so I'm sure people's minds are just spinning. And I know one of the things that I'm taking away is for you and I to connect offline on how we can be helping you recruit participants into apprenticeship programs that you're helping get off the ground or expanding. So that's a way certainly that we can use the data and connect into that. But I'm always blown away by how much I don't know in the apprenticeship space in terms of how many there are. And I'm just, so I don't know if anybody else is feeling that way, but feel free to unmute and ask questions, or if you want to digest and follow up later. Dorinda is always super energetic. I'm not convinced that she ever drinks coffee. She's just always this energetic. So you have to listen very carefully.
Not coffee. I don't do coffee. Don't like it. I'm an iced tea person. So.
All right. Well, thank you. I think Dorinda will be around for a few more moments in terms of she can monitor the chat if there's specific things that people would like to share. And you can also see that there's lots of votes for chocolate and some for Cadbury eggs, but feel free to take a quick look there. What I'd like to do now is segue over to Crystal Keaton, who's going to share a little bit about some apprenticeship programs that the GRIT Project has supported. And so, Crystal, I welcome you. I can share your slides or your video. You tell me what you'd like me to put up, and we can go from there.
Why don't we start with the video to give people just a taste of what I'm going to talk about first.
Okay. I just have to find which of my many tabs it is in, because I do have it ready to go here in one of my various tabs. Okay, it's hiding behind the Valentine's Day trivia. Got to have my priorities straight here. And share sound. All right, here we go. Let me know if you don't hear the audio, but it says I shared sound.
The Electrical Training Academy was established in 1977 and is located in Portsmouth, Ohio. We provide training for electrical contractors, journey-level workers, apprentices, and pre-apprentices. We are offering a pre-apprenticeship program that has the power to change your future. This 15-week training is in partnership with the bricklayers, electricians, plumbers and pipe fitters, and the sheet metal workers programs. Classes will meet in Portsmouth 2 nights a week for 4 hours. This fast-paced training will provide an overview on the construction trades, OSHA 10, first aid CPR, hand and power tools, aerial lift certification, and trade-specific training that will ensure success in their chosen trade. The Foundations for the Trades Pre-Apprenticeship program is designed to give individuals an opportunity to find and develop a working skill set that they enjoy, improve their financial situations, and give them a sense of pride in the work they are doing. Applying is easy. Visit our website, give us a call, email us, or check us out on Facebook.
Thank you, Christy, for sharing that. Some of you might have heard that ad before on other Zoom calls, but it also runs from time to time on local radio stations, and I think maybe on the cable channels as well here in Southern Ohio. We have developed the Foundations for the Trades pre-apprenticeship program with the Electrical Training Academy, which is the IBW apprenticeship program here in Southern Ohio, back in 2021, through a Department of Labor and ODJFS grant with Apprentice Ohio, which allowed our workforce board to become a apprenticeship hub. That's a pretty big deal to become an apprenticeship hub, in that we can also stand up other pre-apprenticeships through not only the Electrical Training Academy and the Foundations for the Trades, but also through our workforce board. It allows us to be a sponsor. Christy, can you share my slides? Currently, we are recruiting for cohort 12. We just finished up cohort 11 of this pre-apprenticeship program. This slide here tells you a little bit about the program. Christy, can you go back one slide? I just kind of wanted to point out that this is a multifaceted trade pre-apprenticeship. Of course, that's IBW, electricians. They do in-house electricity work, also what we call low voltage. Dorinda just spoke about that. Low voltage for us in this program was teaching individuals how to put together alarm systems, put internet wiring into new builds, those types of security systems, other electrical work that runs systems inside of hospitals and other office buildings and other manufacturers. We also had the plumbers and pipe fitters involved in this pre-apprenticeship, the bricklayers and allied trades, and the sheet metallist. Those four were our first four trades in this program. Recently, we brought on the operating engineers to this program as well. So we're excited to have them involved starting in late 2024. Now you can go to the next slide. Again, like I said, this pre-apprenticeship is sponsored by Workforce Development Board 1. I believe that we are one of maybe 4 workforce boards in the state of Ohio that is an actual workforce hub. This training is operated by Electrical Training Academy and currently is funded through GRIT funding. Like I said earlier in this project, in the start of 2021, we had this a grant through Department of Labor and through ODJFS. Over time, that grant funding has ended, and we were seeing so many individuals who were coming into this pre-apprenticeship who had actually assessed and been coached and was being funded anyway by GRIT for their supportive services, that we felt this would be a good program for GRIT to fund. Since GRIT began funding the entire program, we have put through 48 individuals. Before they began funding the entire program, just in supportive services, we funded over 160 individuals. So GRIT has been a big part of this program and the funding of it. Christy, if you want to go to the next slide. We are currently recruiting, like I said, for cohort number 12. We just graduated 11. In that group of cohort 11, we had 24 individuals who successfully completed. All 24 of them graduated or completed on January 30th. And as of February, let me look at the calendar here, February 3rd, they were all employed and on the job, working in their chosen trades. Many of those students have already what we call transition over to a registered apprenticeship. Others will transition when those classes open back up this summer. Several of our trades organizations that we work with have certain time periods that take apprentice in, and some have a rotating one. So those that could have already been accepted have been. Those that have to wait till a waiting period, they will transition when those become available. Much like what Dorinda was saying about mentoring, this program is heavy on the mentoring. We call it confidence building for these individuals. And if you've ever heard our coordinator for this program speak, Matt Lewinglaff, he always talks about how individuals come in on the first day of class very unsure of what's going to happen, not have a lot of experience in the trade, or even if they've had a lot of experience in the trade, have a lot of doubt about if they belong in this type of environment. And by week 2, these individuals are walking out with their heads up. They know where they're going to put their tools at, what they're going to start doing for the day, and have already latched on to a mentor to assist them. They also have some other things built into the program to where the individuals get a text every day, asking them if they have any questions, if they're having any issues on the jobs, any issues at home. Also asking them about successes they've had and other challenges, just to try to keep them engaged and back with their mentor and back with the program so that we can try to help them overcome whatever barriers they're seeing, but also cheer them on through their successes as well. So that's been something that we've started probably in the last 6 months through a program that they call encouragements. We also get reports back every weekend, even from the individuals. So it's kind of a nice tool. The apprentice and the pre-apprentice know that that's going to happen, throughout the week, and that they can easily converse back with somebody to get assistance of any type that they need. This is a 15-week course. It's offered Tuesdays and Thursday nights from 5 to 9. We have found that running it in the evenings has been the most successful. Individuals are able to continue to work during the day if they're involved somehow with a legal system or with treatment centers. They're still able to complete that during the day and then come to class in the evening from 5 to 9. There is 3 phases to this program. Foundations, which is the basic concepts of getting their OSHA 10, learning some about hand tools. Then concepts is really kind of learning how to put those tools to use. And then phase 3 is being trade specific, where they choose what trade out of the 5 that they want to focus on. And that is usually when they also go out on the job and begin to be able to earn. This, like I said, is a 15-week course. Each phase is 5 weeks long. Again, we are recruiting for cohort 12, which starts June 3rd. This is a great opportunity for those high school graduates of 2025. They will graduate at the end of May, and they could enroll directly into this program on June 3rd. Last summer, we ran a similar cohort with individuals, and it was one of our largest cohorts of youth. I believe we ended up having 10 individuals who had either graduated in the class of 24 or 23 go through the program successfully. And at the completion ceremony, one of the mothers was telling me that she had 2 sons. One had graduated the year before from high school and had enrolled into college and wasn't quite sure if that was going to be their path going forward or not. And this second son that had graduated in 2024 enrolled in this program. And he had actually been able to go to work during the program. And he had actually earned more wages than what her other son had in debt from college. So she was very happy, that her son was being successful and being able to earn, and had the opportunity, as Dorinda mentioned, to go into registered apprenticeship and still be able to earn a college degree after 4 years of apprenticeship. And so she was wanting to bring her other son in to see if he was interested in this type of trade as well. So we'll see if he shows up for cohort 12 or not. Be interesting to see. There is an application deadline for this cohort, May 23rd. We'll have 2 orientations, one in Adams County at the training center in West Union on May 27th, and then another one at the Electrical Training Academy in Rosemount on May 29th. At the bottom of this slide, there is a link to where you can go and apply for the apprenticeship. You also can reach out to myself through my email, and I can send a link to you, or I'm sure Christy will put the link in the weekly roundup as well. Or you can call to Electrical Training Academy and they will walk you through. Usually they do these presentations. We just had cohort 11 and our coordinator and our and his admin assistant. They're taking some time off to get ready to ramp up for cohort 12, so they'll be back next week. But if they fill the application out online, it will still get to them, or you can give me an email. So any questions about this program? I'd like to say it is free of cost because of GRIP funding to individuals who enroll. There is no tuition for the program. There is cost that may be concurred by the individual for tools and boots. We generally try to help those individuals figure that out, either with assistance through the Ohio Needs Job Centers or through GRIP funding. So we do come out and at the orientations and try to get individuals, you know, who need help getting boots and tools, assistance. So pretty much this program can be free of cost to a person if they so choose or need the assistance.
Excellent. Well, thank you. I did drop that link. I will share the slides. And I want to kind of highlight one thing and then turn it over to Terry Bennett to wrap up the pre-apprenticeship side. Crystal, and correct me if I'm wrong, because it's taken me a long time to get it straight in my head, because Terry's going to talk about pre-apprenticeship starting at the high school level. And it's where sometimes I think the language gets confusing, because this program offers a pre-apprenticeship as a way to get adults that initial hands-on training so that they can confirm they want to go into it and commit. And then they select the actual, because it's in a collaboration with all those different organizations Crystal mentioned, they then go into their registered apprenticeship after they've completed that first little bit of training. And did I say that correctly to differentiate, Crystal?
So there is actually, I'm sure Terry's going to touch on this, there's actually two types of pre-apprenticeship: the youth a pre-apprenticeship and adult pre-apprenticeship. A pre-apprenticeship is just like you said, a taste of the trade or taste of the occupation to see if you're actually interested in the program. It also gives you a leg up in that you're able to learn more about that trade, but also about the apprenticeship program itself and how to apply, what the culture of that trade is like, and to give you some of that basic knowledge to start you down that path. The one that we operate is an adult-based pre-apprenticeship. You have to be a high school graduate and 18 years or older to participate in that program. While you're pre-apprenticeship, there is a different scale of wage for those individuals. I believe our scale it changes all the time. I think it's somewhere between $15 and $16 while they're a pre-apprentice. When you become a registered apprentice, you have to already complete the pre-apprentice and then go through the application piece and interview to be accepted into the next stage, which is the registered apprenticeship. So they've done 15 weeks. And then once they start into the regular apprenticeship or a registered apprenticeship, you'll hear it called a wrap a lot of times. That is anywhere from 3 to 4 years generally in a construction trade. Each year steps you up into a different year of apprenticeship. You'll hear people say, I'm a 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 year. And what that means is they have earned credentialing and skills to move up into those years. And they've also put in enough hours to be considered a different level, a different year. And with each year that you move up or each level, then you are also able to move up in a staggered way of wages. So, a year one apprentice, I'm just making this up, this is not the actual wage, might be making $19 an hour. And then a year two might be making $21.50. And then each year just going up until you hit the max at year 4. And then after year 4, when you complete, you're considered a journeyman. So then you would earn, the scale wage.
Well, thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Terry. And Terry, I know there's a lot of detail you could cover on the pre-apprenticeship side, but I'm hoping you can kind of focus in on the compare and contrast of what does it mean for pre-apprenticeship at the high school level, so we can kind of bring it all together for folks to see how these things can work together.
Okay, let me make sure. Are you seeing my screen okay?
Yep, we're good.
Awesome. So I will hit the highlights. I will start with the disclaimer that I do not have the expertise of Dorinda, who did a fantastic job of explaining all parts, as well as Crystal. But we'll hit some of the highlights in this amount of time. Kind of quickly, you heard that, as Dorinda mentioned, there are a lot of things that are similar to pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship. There's the focus on skill development and getting ready for the workforce. It's a pathway to employment, industry recognition, and there's way more, and we'll get into some of those as well. But there are some differences as well that Crystal mentioned. You know, at what stage in the career path they're in. Pre-apprenticeship is more of a preparatory program to get you ready to go to an apprenticeship. You're working on more fundamental skills. It's shorter in duration. The focus is on those foundational skills as opposed to some of those industry-specific skills. You don't really receive a formal certificate like you would with a regular apprenticeship, and the wages are different. There are sometimes no wages in pre-apprenticeship. Sometimes there's some stipends or financial assistance. In Ohio, we have the opportunity to have a recognized pre-apprenticeship that is required for our high schools and pre-apprenticeships of note. And that's because of the Ohio State Apprenticeship Council. So they set standards, like Crystal mentioned. These RAPs, they often have recognition and formal agreements with these RAPs as well. And then there are support services and industry credentials. So these pieces kind of are the binding that gives the recognized pre-apprenticeship its value. So even though pre-apprenticeship is kind of like apprenticeship light, it still has, you know, some regulations as well as paperwork. And to Crystal's point, there are different types of pre-apprenticeship. We have the youth recognized pre-apprenticeship, the adult that she mentioned, and then there can be a mix of those. We're going to talk a little bit more about those with the high school, but in general, you still have to have some components. Like you have to have that related instruction, you have to have a work-based learning experience, you have to have an operating plan, and you have to connect to training providers as well as a registered apprenticeship program. Currently, Ohio has lots of pre-apprenticeships. It's really been exploding. And these pre-apprenticeships are really a gateway to kind of get more of our students on the path to those great opportunities that Dorinda mentioned in apprenticeships. In Ohio, we have the opportunity to have this be very beneficial to our high schools, as well as our high school students, because pre-apprenticeship is worth an industry recognized credential of 12-point value, which can go toward graduation in the alternate pathway graduation. It also contributes to an industry recognized credential seal. It also contributes to portions of the OMJ readiness seal. It also has the opportunity to get innovative workforce incentive funds, which are funds beyond the reimbursement funds from the state for a student completing a pre-apprenticeship. Student earns work-based learning hours that are becoming more and more instrumental in the school report card. And as I mentioned, there's still the basic reimbursement. This graphic at the bottom, which I know is probably hard to see, kind of shows that pre-apprenticeship is actually located in the industry recognized credentials for Ohio in every career field pathway, all worth 12-point value, all with a reimbursement of $50 on its own. But if you utilize the IWIP funds, that can be up to another $12.50 in funds. So in terms of the high school credential, that pre-apprenticeship is part of the career experience and technical skill pathway, where a student can earn an industry recognized credential or complete the pre-apprenticeship, utilizing either 2 of these 7. One must be foundational, so the pre-apprenticeship covers that. It actually covers both of them in the foundational because it's an industry recognized credential and it's a pre-apprenticeship. But it already contributes to those supporting options below, as I mentioned, with work-based learning and also the Ohio means jobs readiness seal contributions. So we've kind of talked about this already, but there are additional benefits because this helps schools build positive relationships with industry. They can connect with their BAC, chambers of commerce, and employers get this pipeline of motivated, career-oriented students who are on that path already. So as both have mentioned prior to me, the pathway is pre-apprenticeship onto registered apprenticeship, on to making money. Schools can, schools all can be their own provider, or they can use, like Dorinda mentioned, sponsors. And I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. We know that in our case, we know in our region, we have entities like the Education Service Center of Eastern Ohio, who facilitates a lot of our schools with paperwork and things of that nature to help provide them not as much of a heavy lift, I should say, because that can be a little daunting for smaller schools with less personnel. So these sponsors can help with program development, partnerships, compliance, support, and like I said, ECO, ESC, as well as places like Sinclair do that. Our the process, you kind of start with program development. You do curriculum design, so you got to do that, get that related curriculum. You got to get approval. Then you get a training partner, get approval from Apprentice Ohio, and work with their service providers, and then go all the way through to completion, and hopefully that transition to registered apprenticeship. It's not like the old days where it's just a trade. You're able to use any of the industry clusters for a recognized pre-apprenticeship as long as you can connect to a registered apprenticeship. And I know we're close on time, but that's the highlights. So I'll conclude there.
Well, thank you very much, Terry. That is really important and really enlightening. We'll share these slides as well. What since this call is focused on adult, what I wanted to do is that it took me several years of attending many presentations to understand how this whole pre-apprenticeship, apprenticeship, it was always very confusing to me the way that it was presented in general, because there is the youth version and the adult version, and the language is similar and yet different. So I hope what we did today was give you an understanding of how these programs all fit together. I love the high school pre-apprenticeship option, as it provides an option to have what I think of as like a taster's choice. That's the ice cream person in me, loving when they let you have more than one flavor. But I don't suppose it's that you're necessarily trying lots of careers, but it is the idea that you do some training and you get out into the field and start to experience that career before committing to a longer registered apprenticeship program or additional training. And that's how those things fit together. So hopefully you benefited today from all of these amazing resources. There are fantastic ways for individuals to get that workforce training and get started working. I love the message Crystal delivered about the student that what's foregone for, I can't say the word anyways, that avoided some of the debt that they would have incurred by going in a degreed pathway by starting down this way. So thanks to everybody for being here today. I'll get this information back out to you in terms of slides and links, and feel free to send questions back, and we'll make sure to distribute those answers. So have a happy February 13th, almost 14th, pre-Valentine's Day. I know it's a Hallmark holiday, but it is a chance to spread a little joy in a dreary month of February. So thanks everyone for being here, and see y'all next time.
Thanks, Christy. Have a good day.
Bye.
Thank you.